I'm Ben Ryman, and this is Behavior Speak.
So, you hear terms like maladaptive behavior sometimes, but nothing is maladaptive. It's adaptive if it's occurring. Behavior always makes sense. This isn't something that's just constructional. This is something that comes right from the beginning of behavior analysis with Skinner. The rat is always right. The student is always right. The learner is always right. So whatever is happening for a reason. The contingencies are there for it. Our job is to go in and analyze those contingencies and find out, why is this the most rational thing? Why would they be putting up with all this cost that comes with the behavior to get this reinforcer? When you talk to people, usually they're like, well, he can just ask for it. If he can just ask for it, I feel like he would have asked for it, right? Like there must be other factors going on here, other contingencies. And it's our job to go in there and be contingency detectives and look for those contingencies and find them and harness them, rather than coming in and overriding them or doing extinction or escape extinction. But when I'm faced with a problem, please just sit back and ask yourself, what's the repertoire, the absence of which is the problem? And if you think, wow, he's just oversimplifying it. Is it really just about this one question? Of course, it's not just about this question, but I think this question puts us at an angle that changes our trajectory of what we do after it. When we go in asking what's the behavior that we need to establish that would make that problem go away, it sets us up to be more likely to be successful in whatever we do after it. Goldiamond introduced the constructional approach. He said it's an orientation. He called it an orientation, and I love that word because truly it does give you a lens that you're just looking at things differently. I walk into a situation and I see it differently than someone else who's coming in and focusing on reducing the problem behavior. And I think we can gain a lot from that.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining me for my 50th episode. It's been an absolute honor to share this space with so many incredible humans over the past 5 years. I'm so grateful and humbled by you, the audience, for all of your incredible feedback and support over the years. I would not be here today without you. Next week, we're turning the tables, and Dr. Asmahan Saleh from episode 200 will be interviewing me. I'm both nervous and excited to be in the interview seat, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm really excited about today's episode. 2 years ago, the good folks at the Institute for Applied Behavior Science at Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts hosted a free conference on the constructional approach, which I attended after listening to a podcast interview where the speaker mentioned this approach. The conference was incredible, and a particular case study that stood out for me was, and I'm paraphrasing, a middle-aged adult man with an immense fear of vacuum cleaners, the sound of which triggered all sorts of severe, dangerous behavior. I can't remember the procedures, but the end result was that the individual, with a very short time, maybe a half an hour of intervention, had not only ceased being afraid of vacuums, but was now vacuuming the floor himself. I was hooked. Fast forward to this past December, after spending a year telling all my colleagues this story, Endicott hosted a second free conference with so many more amazing presentations, like Morgan Katz, who was using this approach to teach fearful shelter dogs to approach and interact with strangers as a prelude to adoptions. Danielle Cohen with her incredible case study of a 9-year-old boy who, because of such a strong phobia to fingernail clippers, had to have his fingers and toenails clipped in secret while he was asleep for his whole life. And within hours was clipping his nails with a proud father looking on. Amazing. Katie Gibson, who teaches hospital staff and parents to use this really cool Assent-based exposure protocol to help children accept life-saving interventions from blood draws to anesthesia. It was amazing. I knew I had to meet and learn as much as I could from all these amazing scholars and practitioners, and I wanted to know everything about it. So I decided to start a series on the podcast where every month I'll release an episode on this topic, starting with today's episode, where Awab Abdel-Jalil provides an introduction to the constructional approach and nonlinear contingency analysis. Awab is the Associate Vice President of Applied Research at Upstate Caring Partners in Utica, New York, and is a doctoral candidate at Endicott College under the mentorship of Dr. Joe Layng. I love this conversation, and I know you will too. Okay, welcome, Awab.
Thanks for having me.
You're the first interview in a series I'm doing on the constructional approach. Really excited to learn more about it, and you're episode 1 for kind of general overview. So for people who are kind of learning and hearing constructional approach for the first time, what does it actually mean to be constructional?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like that's at the center of all of this. I think, this is a time where a lot more people are getting interested in the approach, and I feel like the big emphasis, which makes sense because it's in the name, is constructing. You're constructing repertoires. That's kind of where the idea comes from, but there's a lot more to it, of course. But I feel like I would like to start with the main question within the constructional approach in my eyes, and it comes from Israel Goldiamond's 1974 paper, is that we go into situations asking, what is the repertoire, the absence of which is the problem? So we don't just go in and just build something and say that we're constructional, but we truly want to try to get down to what are these repertoires that need to be established so that that problem is just no longer there, no longer needed, no longer even relevant. And I feel like that's to me the best way to summarize being constructional. It's establishing repertoires, the absence of which creates problems for people, and keeping in mind, of course, the ecology of the behavior and being true, paying attention to social significance and social validity. Like all of these things are a sort of a given in the constructional approach because we go in and ask people, where do you want to go? If you're looking at the questions of the constructional approach, the question number one is, where do you want to go? If we were completely successful, what would the outcome look like for you and your family? We want to try to get that answer as directly as possible, make sure that's actually the repertoire, the absence of which is the problem. And we go in and we build it. And we build it using naturally occurring reinforcers as much as possible. And we do it using shaping. We do it using, a lot of different strategies from programming. And we program for generalization and maintenance right from the beginning because we already took into account a lot of these environmental variables. And I would say, in a nutshell, that's what it means to be constructional.
Yeah, and I think this is a good distinction because I'm sure you've had the question a lot. I know you have because I've seen it in some of the conference presentations you've done, where it's not just a matter of increasing your sort of positive behaviors or good behaviors or even adaptive behaviors. The behaviors have to be connected here. So because I think a lot of the time we see folks offering sort of to increase a sort of a, I don't know what the proper term is, but like an intermediary behavior, sort of like asking for a break or the ability to tolerate a break in between or denial of a request and sort of things, sort of essentially teaching folks to put up with the situation as it is and move along. And so the difference you're saying here is that we want to teach a skill so that there's just no situation in the first place.
Right. And I think that is a big one. We're living in a time where like teaching toleration skills, teaching these types of skills that kind of just like you were saying, I feel like you put it exactly how I usually think about it. Teach you to just be okay with whatever is going around you without asking like, well, why isn't it okay? Like, hold on, why do I need to teach a tolerance response here? What's in the environment that's so intolerable that I need to teach tolerance skills? Now, if it's like we're preparing for a dental visit, that's not going to be a very pleasant event. There are still ways to go about this constructionally. But when it's tolerating people's feedback, if the feedback is excessive, when it's tolerating environments that truly ethically none of us should be able to tolerate, no, toleration isn't actually the answer there. Let's actually look at what are the contingencies in place that are making the problem behavior the rational behavior to happen. So, you hear terms like maladaptive behavior sometimes, but nothing's maladaptive. It's adaptive if it's occurring. Behavior always makes sense. This isn't something that's just constructional. This is something that comes right from the beginning of behavior analysis with Skinner. The rat is always right. The student is always right. The learner is always right. So whatever is happening for a reason. The contingencies are there for it. Our job is to go in and analyze those contingencies and find out, why is this the most rational thing? Why would they be putting up with all this cost that comes with the behavior to get this reinforcer? When you talk to people, usually they're like, well, he can just ask for it. If he can just ask for it, I feel like he would have asked for it, right? Like there must be other factors going on here, other contingencies, and it's our job to go in there and be contingency detectives and look for those contingencies and find them and harness them, rather than coming in and overriding them or doing extinction or escape extinction or, there's a lot of that happening. It's a hard thing to quantify. Recently, I gave a talk about the constructional approach, and I was saying things like this, where like, this is common or that's common, and someone asked, what's your data on that? And I'm like, I wish we could pull quick data like that, but that's, one day maybe with AI, but we don't have that data right now. But I'm just speaking from my own clinical experience and the people that we've talked to. But taking that step back and truly asking what is going on in the environment, especially when I hear people like, teach them to ask for a break. But why is the break so important? Like when we're doing things we enjoy, when we're in environments we enjoy, we don't need to ask for escape. Again, sometimes you do. Like I'm not saying that's a skill to not teach. Definitely teach people to ask for things to stop and for them to escape situations. But first ask yourself, why is the situation creating such an MO for escape? And is that what I want the situation to be doing? Or did that happen because of a lack of a repertoire that I can put in place to where that negative reinforcement now is depotentiated or that MO is removed?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think about taking a break. I think about taking a break from something either that's exhausting me, maybe I haven't got enough sleep, or I've just been working too hard and putting too much energy in. I need to rest. I need to rest my mind. I'm probably engaged in something I enjoy, but I just need a chance to regroup and whatnot. And I think there are legitimately some folks out there that do need to be taught to take a break, because some folks overwork themselves and burden themselves. But we're really talking about folks that are doing things that they don't enjoy whatsoever, and when they come back from the 15-minute break or the 20-minute break or the 10-minute break, they're going to continue to not enjoy it whatsoever. And in a way, by teaching them to take a break, we're sort of avoiding looking at what the actual problem is here. Do you have a certification with the International Behavior Analysis Organization, the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or are certified through your region's Behavior Analyst Credentialing Board? You can earn continuing education units for this episode by going to www.behaviorspeak.com and clicking on CEUs. The first secret word is gold.
Absolutely. And because it truly, it's always going to come down to the contingencies. And notice we're saying contingencies plural, not contingency singular, which we'll come back to nonlinear analysis in a little bit, but and looking at more than one contingency. But I think a lot of it comes from not seeing that negative, implicit or explicit negative reinforcement contingency that's there and asking why it's there. But also when we're teaching, using that naturally occurring reinforcer, because you see people building these long chains of behavior that are actually like really good, useful chains, useful repertoires. But when you look at what's maintaining it, it's an artificial thing maintaining it. It's not truly tied in with its ecology. When we do things in our environment, we do it to directly manipulate the world. I don't go and do my dishes so that I can get this other thing that's disconnected. I do this so they can be clean, so that next time when I want to eat something, they're ready to go. These are what we call program specific reinforcers. The program itself produces it. I'm not imposing it on a program. When I go and play, well, I don't anymore, but when I was younger and I would go out and play basketball with my friends, I didn't play basketball with my friends so that I can get praise afterwards, so that I can get access to my video game afterwards. I went out and played basketball with my friends because I enjoyed the action itself, the movement, being with my friends, going back and forth, scoring a basket, dribbling, all of these things that naturally occur within the program maintained my participation within the program without superimposing another contingency that now we didn't touch the underlying one. So this is the only thing that's keeping it up. But if we remove this, everything's going to go back to how it was, because we didn't truly take into account that ecology.
Yeah, I love that. So how does the constructional lens kind of change what we pay attention to when someone's struggling?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you go in asking about, what I already went over, like what repertoire do I want to establish. So I'm not just looking at the problem, I'm actually looking at where I want to go. But then the second question, the constructional approach, so the first is where do you want to go? The second one is where are you now? So that's another area where you're looking at things differently when you come at it constructionally. So I go in and I say, what are the current relevant repertoires that people have right now that I can build on to get to where I want to go? So I'm going in and looking at strengths. I'm looking at assets. I'm looking at general, just what are some skills this person has? So when you go in and you're asking these questions, not only are you getting a lot of useful information that you'll later use in your program, because you'll be like, oh, well, I can incorporate this because I know they're good at that. I know that, something that might be looked at as a problem. Oh, they talk excessively if you talk to them and they can't end the conversation. Okay, but so they can go back and forth. They can talk. They have that social skill. I can use that in the program in this way. They throw things off their desk. Oh, well, so they're good at throwing? Like, hold on, do they aim? Okay, well, let's keep that in mind. That's a skill that
Hmm.
might come to play. I might not have it into play in the beginning, but like, but the other thing that that does is also, the person you're talking to, like, let's say I go in and I'm consulting or talking to a BCBA or something like that, it starts changing the way they're viewing the person as well. They start seeing their behavior as rational, number one, which is very
Hmm.
important. But number two, oh, I guess they can do this. I guess they can do
Yeah.
that. I guess they can do that. And we all start asking about the history a little bit too. And well, they did at some point do it. How can we reinstate these repertoires? So the
Hmm.
constructional approach, when Goldiamond originally described it, he said establishing repertoires or reinstating repertoires, which means they used to exist and now we're bringing the contingencies back to bring the behaviors back, or transferring repertoires. So you also ask questions like, do they engage in this ideal behavior under any other conditions? Can we create
Hmm.
that condition and start our teaching from there?
Hmm.
Some people like to teach, from the hottest place, so to speak, but I want to teach from the coldest place.
Hmm.
Tell me
Hmm.
where the problem is the least problematic, and let's go start teaching from there because they'll
Hmm.
contact success quickly. They'll start moving along that program, and we can build and build and build strength on strength. Don't
Yeah.
start from the hardest place. Start from the easiest place where you already have some success and shape from there.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I mean, just coming from sort of this space of, we never want to. They always talk about don't teach folks when they're engaging in problem behavior. But if you're always sort of in that hot zone, it's really hard to find that narrow window where you can teach. So you find them where they're already, sort of accessing reinforcement and whatnot. It makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about something you said that I think was really valuable was, I think this comes down to sort of this idea of competence and competence in the individuals we serve. I think when we think about a lot of the folks that we work with, especially those that maybe have profoundly restrictive environments and typically non-vocal and sort of fit into this sort of stereotypical sort of archetype of a person, and there's this whether overt or not, there's this presumption of incompetence. Like, my son will never be able to do this, or he's never going to be capable of that, or there's no way he's going to have those skills. And you and I are seeing the same thing in this individual, but you're able to kind of reframe that into something positive, which entirely shapes sort of the perspective. And there's probably some relational frame theory stuff kind of happening here as well for the parent when you start sort of talking about these things. I think that's a really important point, that just we can look at these sort of so-called deficits and reframe them as assets.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's why, like, one of the questions, if you look at the constructional questionnaire, the original one, like the long version of it is, if we were 3-4 months out of you getting everything you wanted out of this program, what would your
Hmm.
life look like?
Hmm.
And a lot of that, we're trying to build this abstract or instructional control to get people's
Hmm.
imagination to really open up so they can
Hmm.
look beyond all the deficits and tell us, just give me your wildest imagination. What do you want to get?
Hmm.
Because even if we can't get that, there might be something about that we can get. So, we'll be able to sit down and have a dinner together. Okay, but now that you told me that, even if we can't get to that for, like, let's say even some physical reasons where you just can't do that, but we could think of other activities that have some shared family time. Is that what's critical about it to you?
Hmm.
So we can ask follow-up questions like that. Okay, so if you did have dinner together, what about that is the most important?
Hmm.
Well, we get a time where we're not doing other things and we can actually sit down and, can we get that out of a different activity? So we truly want to open those horizons for folks and get them to ask for their wildest dreams. In fact, there's a paper that was published by Timothy Lydon and Jesus Rosales Ruiz out of the University of North Texas about working with parents. And I
Hmm.
think the way they phrased that question, they put their own twist on the constructional question is, if a genie told you had 3 wishes, what would they be? Because they're really trying to open that imagination as much as possible so that we can really see what are the critical reinforcers that people are after, and how can we at least approximate those or get some things that have similar properties to those and program for them, rather than coming in thinking like very small, like, oh, they won't be engaging in SIB. Okay, they won't be engaging in SIB. Absolutely. Like, of course, that makes sense. It's dangerous behavior. if they weren't engaging in SIB, what would they be doing during that time? They'd be doing this. What would you be doing during that time? What would the siblings be doing during that time? Like, truly, when I use the word ecology, I do mean it in that recreate that whole environment and think about as much as possible and reasonable, and it depends on the setting and whatnot, but get as many of those variables as possible so that you can truly go in informed when you're building those goals, and they're not just generic, but they're truly things that will stick, and you don't have to go in and do explicit generalization training because you've already harnessed those naturally occurring contingencies.
I love the "what would you be doing at this time," because I think that really, because I think they're again with that sort of bias of incompetence presumption, they're probably thinking, well, they probably wouldn't be doing much if they're not engaged in self-injury, and I mean that's your problem probably right there, and so when you start asking folks, what are you doing in that environment, that must totally just reshape their whole perspective of what's happening, and also opens up the door, I guess, because another question I was wondering about was, in these restricted, deprived environments, I know you talk about looking for natural sources of reinforcement. How do we find those natural sources of reinforcement in those restricted, deprived atmospheres? But if folks like staff, like family, who aren't engaging in, severe behavior, are having a good time in some way, there must be reinforcers available.
Absolutely. I mean, 'cause that's the thing. I mean, like my advisor in my master's program, Jesus is also he used to always say, if the behavior is happening, then there's an antecedent and there's a consequence. Like he used to say, we take a leap of faith. It's like it's a religion. I'm going to go in and take a leap of behavioral faith and say
Right.
that if there's a behavior going on, then there's an antecedent and there's a consequence. So if I'm being called in because they're problem behavior, then there must be something upholding that. Again, and we're not saying intentionally, or none of this. We're just saying operantly, like we're just talking about contingencies. There must be a contingency there if this behavior is occurring and recurring, occurring and recurring. What is that? And truly be objective with yourself. Like go in there and just, but there's no way they, the staff get upset with them. Well, what does that look like? Oh, well, they go in and they lecture them for, 5 minutes. Okay, but again, if this is my only way for me to get sustained attention from you, where you're going to come and passionately speak to me about something, then my alternatives are restricted. Like I'm only going to access this way until you can shape up other repertoires that get access to other things. And also, again, because I want to carry this theme because I feel like it's an important one, asking ourselves why that is a reinforcer for this person. Why is it so reinforcer to get the attention from the staff? And is that the reinforcer that is the most ideal in that situation, or should we start programming for other ones where they're getting also that one-on-one attention from their peers, from their family, from like every time you find a reinforcer, that's good. You found the reinforcer. Next question also is asking yourself, why could that possibly be a reinforcer? That'll also open up some doors. And I want to go back just for a second about what you said earlier about asking people, what do you want in these situations, and them being kind of content with saying, well, the problem won't be here anymore. I think that comes from, first of all, no one's used to being asked that question. A lot of people, when they come to behavior analysts, they're ready to be like, okay, give me your top 3 problem behaviors. When is it the worst? They're not used to people saying like, when is it the best? Give me your top 3, like the genie question. Like what would the 3 things that you wish for be? Like they're not used to that. And number 2, that's, they're coming to see you because that it's in itself a negative reinforcement contingency. Like that the big MO is there, the potentiating variable is there for me to get rid of this problem. I mean, you hear people who are talking about their behavioral programs when they're out there talking about them, they come in and say like, our goal is to eliminate problem behavior. Like that's the selling point. But that makes sense because truly, like there's a lot of severe problem behavior going on. And that is the contingency right now, is to get rid of it. And we're not going to discount that at all. Absolutely, we don't want that problem behavior to exist anymore. But what I'm asking you is to also think beyond that. Like think that, but also let's go with me on this journey and let's think beyond that. Let's say that problem behavior was gone. What would you see? And let's start trying to build towards that. And that might get us longer, further along the way. And of course, there's a lot of people, as you said, you're going to interview other people doing a lot of this work, and hopefully with the years we start getting more and more actual research out there
Hmm.
that is, from the century, because a lot of the work on the constructional approach is very old. But hopefully we start getting some of this more recent research so that people can actually see it in print and reference it.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just speculating here because I haven't really read this research, but I'm thinking about that there's a lot of good research on resurgence, and sort of, we do a really good job of getting our problem behavior down to zero levels and so on and so forth, and then they kind of come back. Is what a lot of this research is about, and it kind of digs into that. It seems to be like maybe, in some future research, we may find out that the missing gap is that we haven't filled that void with these important skills, and thus resurgence is probably a lot more likely if you've got the skills to sort of access that reinforcement on your own, and you're probably going to keep using those skills unless some major factor kind of comes into place, like a severe trauma or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I truly think that potentially could create a lot of problems, especially like I was talking about earlier, when we are using these just superimposed extrinsic reinforcers that don't have anything to do with the original contingency that produced all of this from the beginning. So once you remove that contingency, the original contingency remains untouched. So it's going to take control right on back. Um, and of course, also programming and thinking more around stimulus control and thinking about the environments where this is happening and going back to certain environments. There's a lot more to do there, but I do feel like a big part of it is absolutely establishing those repertoires, the absence of which is creating the problem, and giving people, like you've heard me say, repertoire instead of behavior, giving people truly like many alternatives, like um, behaviors plural and cuspal behaviors that truly
Mm,
contact reinforcement and then give them contact to more reinforcing
mm.
contingencies to enter those reinforcement environments and communities and keep growing. That's the goal. And again, I would just want to, I don't know how long we are in, I think 20 something minutes. I want to just give a quick caveat. We're not at all saying like this is so easy. Like I'm not throwing it out
Mm.
here like, yeah, of course, like common sense, like just do it tomorrow and you'll be fine.
Hmm.
But all we're saying is at least start considering this perspective. And if it interests you, learn more about it and really
Mm.
dive in. But just, ask yourself that sometimes, like when you're looking over your goals, just look at them and see like, how many of these do I think are the repertoires, the absence of which created this problem? Let me just go down this list and see. And then, consider, are there others that might serve that function?
No, absolutely. And I think even if someone were to just hit stop on this right now, I think folks already probably have some different ideas on what those initial couple of meetings with the family could look like, and some of those
Hmm.
questions that they're asking, and how just even rephrasing some of these questions in this more positive light to ask about, it's really the sort of strength based, less focus on deficit, more focus on what's there approach. They might find it to be a real relationship building tool as well with families, where you're coming in and just digging into the negative.
Yeah. And people like, for again, personal experience and people I know who do the constructional approach, like people leave those initial meetings when you come in to ask them these questions that are um more focused on what you want to build, more focused on future goals. Like they leave those meetings feeling really good. Like they feel like there's hope. And it's because sometimes for the first time they're seeing that hope. Like they're saying, "Oh, my behavior so far," or the person that I was talking about, their behavior so far totally makes sense given these contingencies.
Hmm.
Their behavior is rational and has been rational. And if we start changing these contingencies, that behavior might take a different trajectory.
Yeah.
And notice we're talking about changing the contingencies, not changing the person. Like I'm not interested in going in there and messing with these idiosyncratic behavior. Like I'm talking about big goals that actually change
Hmm.
quality of life type goals. I'm not talking about going in there and just like, can we get rid of this little thing that some people consider annoying? Like that's not what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about seeing someone as their behavior completely makes sense given the contingencies, and how can we change those contingencies if they need to be changed.
Yeah, no, I love that. It also makes me think about, as I was kind of starting to learn more about the constructional approach, I tried to, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this series, is I tried to find podcast interviews that talked about this, and they're mostly interviews with you and and a couple others that I kind of found out there. And one that I was listening to was an interview with Dr. Claire St. Peter on the Behavioral Observations podcast. And one thing she was talking about with a particular case study, which I thought was just so interesting and made so much sense, was it was around, and I can't remember the context exactly. It was some sort of classroom management situation, and it was around a struggle to get staff or teachers to collect good data on the problem behavior, and so her team kind of shifted the lens to say, instead of looking at problem behavior, I want you to take some good data on some of these adaptive behaviors, adaptive skills you're seeing in the environment. When are they accessing reinforcement independently, and those sorts of things. And she talked about kind of how just that simple shift in mindset for the data collector really increased the fidelity of data collection, and also just increased the whole. It actually probably somewhat indirectly reduced problem behavior in itself, because you are now actively focused on and giving attention to these sort of positive behaviors versus keeping an eye on and hitting your clicker, potentially doing some clicker training every time someone engaged in one of these problem behaviors. And so just some of these just basic small shifts in the way we talk to people and ask them to do things and look at things can have a huge impact. And so you can only imagine what the rest of the process will be like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it gives us a different analytical lens too. Like there's a paper that, it doesn't talk about the constructional approach at all anywhere explicitly in it, but implicitly, I loved the way they did their analysis. It was actually about toe walking. It was I want to say 2022. I believe Dave Wilder, if I'm not, but we'll make sure we upload the right references here once this is out. But it was, and again, the aim was in the title to reduce toe walking, so it doesn't sound constructional, and it's not if you're just looking at reducing toe walking. But actually, when you look at the paper, they actually were increasing flat-toed walking. But what I liked about that paper the most was the analysis. What they did was they went and looked at were these two participants walking with flat feet, and they changed different types of textures. I think it was like carpet, grass, and linoleum or something like that. It was 3 different types of textures. And they had, it looked like kind of an old school FA graph where they saw like how much flat-footed walking is going on these 3 different types of flooring. And that ended up informing a completely different kind of intervention, rather than a lot of what was already in the literature about like, prompting on the shoulder and like doing all these kinds of things, where it was kind of a creative solution. I don't know the follow-up on it. I need to look into that. But the solution was like transferring that environment and creating these soles for the shoes that were made of that material to promote that type of walking. And I don't know if they ended up fading it out or not, but like, that's genius. That's thinking about where is the behavior that I want already happening, and can I bring that stimulus control into a different situation to evoke that behavior, and then it gets reinforced by its environment and carries forward. So truly, when I go in and I ask these questions, it produces a different lens, a different analysis, which yields different procedures and different outcomes. I've commonly also been hearing people say like, oh, the constructional approach, like that's just semantics. You're rephrasing things positively. I can do that with any goal. And I would like to very much challenge that. And I don't agree with that at all, because we came out with completely different outcomes this way than doing it that way. And again, there's a lot of examples out there, but it's a lot more than rephrasing. You're going in and you're looking for different things, and you're aiming to build completely different repertoires.
Yeah. That's a really good overview of kind of the constructional approach. Let's get into the other term that I think doesn't roll off the tongue so easily. That some folks kind of struggle with the nonlinear contingency analysis. It sounds pretty intimidating, whereas the constructional approach really, I think, gets people excited. What is it in plain language? What's happening there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And NCA can get, and I think the name doesn't doesn't help with it because when people hear nonlinear, they think like, oh, all over the place. Like, is this the picture we're imagining? Like, linear is like this, and I'm imagining nonlinear like that. But I don't think about it like that at all. I think of linear like this, and then nonlinear is you're also looking at other lines, meaning you're looking at alternative contingencies also. So linear contingency analysis is when I'm looking at the ABC of behavior, kind of like just the most basic form of the way we think about behavior. What's the reinforcer maintaining it? What do they get when they do this one thing? Whereas when we're looking at a nonlinear contingency analysis, it includes the linear one, but goes beyond it. So now not only am I looking at this ABC, but what other ABCs are there? What are the available alternative behaviors and what are their consequences? And again, that gives us a lot more a more powerful starting point to go into later on programming, but it helps us rationalize the behavior. And when this was first introduced, so specifically nonlinear contingency analysis was introduced in 84 in a paper by Goldiamond, the Constructional Approach in 74, so 10 years before that. He talked about it as an issue of causality. So if I can understand this behavior within a linear model, then okay, I got what I want. This behavior makes sense. But the problem is sometimes I look at the ABC and it doesn't make sense. I sit back and I say like, how is this behavior rational? Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, you know, all of these costs are coming with it. Like it doesn't make sense. And then here's the danger of it, and where I think NCA can help us, is then we start appealing to other things. Because the behavior doesn't make sense in our, you know, standard straight up FA, we start making up stories. Oh, well, maybe it's rule governed. Maybe it's this. Maybe, you know, we're really good at coming up with different stories, which again, those stories might be right sometimes. But what we're saying is when the linear analysis doesn't check out, look into the nonlinear ones. Look at the alternative behaviors. Are there any alternative behaviors this person has that gets them access to this reinforcer? That's one question we can ask. Another question we can ask is, if they didn't do this behavior, what would happen? Because I feel like, again, we're really good at asking what happens when they do the behavior, but we're not good at asking, sometimes we're not good at asking, what would happen if they didn't do this behavior? So like the example I gave you earlier, so what would happen when he does do this behavior? Well, someone comes in and lectures him for a few minutes. Well, what if he didn't engage in this behavior? He'd be sitting in his room alone. Oh, okay. So now I'm seeing like it makes sense. This is the only way they're getting social interaction. Okay, now I can do something with that. So those are the kinds of things that start opening up for us. So looking at alternatives that get the same reinforcer, looking at what would happen if they didn't engage in that behavior, not only if they did, and then also looking at the costs and the benefits. The and here is very critical. Again, I feel like we zero in and focus either on the costs or the benefits, but look at the costs and the benefits of that referent behavior, we're going to call it, like the one we're focused on, and also the available alternative behaviors. Look at their costs and benefits, and I guarantee you once you do that, the behavior will make sense. Because the behavior that happens tends to be the resolution of that matrix. It's the behavior that we see is the function of the interaction of the alternative behaviors and their costs and benefits. That's the behavior that we actually see. It's the one that resolves this matrix. It's the one that makes the most sense given these behaviors, plural, and giving these contingencies, plural. The behavior makes sense. But sometimes we shut the door on that. And what we're saying with NCA is open that door and look into the alternatives. They might inform you.
Another area that is kind of gaining ground, and we're hearing a lot about is assent. And I've certainly heard about the term assent for years, and typically it was more in the context maybe of IRBs and sort of when you had individuals that, you know, physically couldn't sign the consent form, then you'd look for assent and to sort of, you know, signal that these folks are willing to kind of participate in the study, and you know, and really didn't go a lot further from there. I now see that it's a lot of these conversations around assent are kind of directly connected to the constructional approach and a compassionate approach. How does assent kind of naturally fit in within a constructional framework?
Yeah, I really, I don't know if this was planned or you just came up with this, but the timing of this question is perfect.
Nice.
Given what I was just saying about the alternative behaviors and nonlinear
Mm.
contingency analysis. So it was really interesting, like when the ascent movement started gaining more and more momentum, like you said, it's always been there. But the momentum of it, I think, came mostly from when it was added to the ethics code, because truly
Mm.
there's nothing that spurs more action than a good old ethics code,
Yep.
because talk about negative reinforcement. People want to hate that contingency.
Yep.
So once that happened, it was interesting. We started our group talking about, like, aren't we talking about degrees of freedom here? Aren't we talking about alternatives to the same reinforcer here? Okay, what can we do with this? And we put out a couple of papers. It's crazy to say this was like 3 years ago because it was 2023, but we put out a couple of papers on a concept analysis of assent, and looking at it in terms of these alternatives. And we talked about how assent really, given our framework and NCA, means that you have someone who's participating and you're monitoring the behavior constantly. Like, the constant monitoring of it is what makes it, like, it's not a one-time event. Like, I sign a
Right.
paper and consent. It's
Right.
continuous. If I have continuous monitoring and there's continuous participation and there's more than one way to get a reinforcer, then we can say that in this situation there's assent. So this is, again, when we start looking at, so if I go into a situation and I see someone doing something and then they get a reinforcer and I say, oh, well, they're doing it and they're doing it over and over, so, like, there must be assent. With the nonlinear contingency analysis lens, I go in and I ask, okay, sure, they're doing this and getting this reinforcer.
Mm.
Are there any other behaviors available for them to engage in to get this reinforcer? And
Mm.
what I think that does is it starts giving us a more technological way to go about it.
Mm.
Technological as in, like, being more descriptive with our procedures, rather than assent kind of being talked about in a more like, ethical big picture, like assent is a good thing, which that should still be talked about. It's just my expertise isn't in ethics, so I'll leave that to the ethics folks. But
Mm.
to us, it starts giving us a technological way to look at this and to analyze it and to be concrete about it, and
Mm.
then to do something with that information. And to me, what got me passionate about assent and what motivated us writing those papers is thinking about the utility of it. So beyond the ethics of it, which I think are pretty
Mm.
obvious at this point in our culture and verbal community, but also the pragmatic part in it for you, for us, the programmers, the teachers, because it starts revealing things about the repertoires of our learners and about their preferences. When we open, so I've used the word degree of freedom, but all I mean by that is it's an alternative that has the same consequence as another behavior that we're looking at, and also
Mm.
the behaviors are equally available. This is an important one. So, like, not something, the occasion, behavior, and consequence,
Mm.
all of them have to be present for it to be a degree of freedom. But so we go in and we ask, are there other ways to access it? And then now I start looking at, well, which way are they doing more? Oh, so is there something about this one that I can adjust? And now I can go in and adjust different things with the program and realize, oh, they like doing this the most in this environment. Or they
Mm.
like doing this program more than this program. Is it because they're not as good at this program? Can we give them different repertoires that now shifts responding this way? So
Mm.
truly useful information for us as programmers and for us as teachers,
Mm.
beyond, again, just doing the ethical thing and doing the moral
Mm.
thing, which, again, is valuable.
Yeah.
I'm not discounting it, but truly gives us an analytical lens that I wouldn't have otherwise. Because if there was only one way for you to get access to this iPad, for example, and I know you really want this iPad, and I'm only giving you one way to access it, and you're engaging in that behavior over and over and over and over, and you're like, see, they love it. I don't know if they love it. Let's add in a second alternative, a third alternative, a fourth alternative,
Mm.
and see how much they love this program.
Hmm.
See how much they're actually going to come and do this program. If they can actually just walk over there and get the other iPad, would they actually come and sit at the table with you? And then if they don't, that doesn't mean, like, oh, let's stop teaching. All right, we're done. We're never going to teach again, because I think that's even worse, because
Mm.
then we're also not being ethical. But how about I bring a different program? Oh, he's still going over there. Okay. Let me back up this program a little bit. Let me try. Oh, now he came and he enjoyed it. Do you see what I
Mm.
mean? So it's kind
Mhm.
of serves as this, like, temperature check on it.
Yep.
Like, in one of our early presentations on Assent, we came up with this metaphor of, it's like a check engine light. Like, when that Assent is withdrawn, we're like, okay, let's go in and diagnose here. Like, what can we change? What things can we, to see, are we going to get that change in responding to follow? So that's how it gives us a lot of information. So not only is the ethical thing to do, but truly pragmatic for practitioners
Yeah,
and
yeah.
for researchers.
And I think that's definitely a shift for a lot of folks where in the past, kind of withdrawal of assent just sort of meant, okay, we stop. Program over. We're not doing this today. We'll take a break or we'll come back, try it again later. But we'll come back and try it again later in the exact same way we tried it before we offered that withdrawal of assent, and we sort of just get to sort of the definition of insanity kind of situation. And what you're saying is here is the withdrawal of assent is such an important teaching tool because it tells us that there's something wrong with our current intervention, our current environment, our current reinforcer availability. It's providing so much information, and we can shift that so that when we start getting more assent, we can tell we're doing a good job.
Absolutely. There's an animal trainer named Ken Ramirez. I saw him at a conference many, many years ago, back when I was still in Texas with Jesus Rosales. He put on a conference for animal trainers. And this Ken Ramirez came and presented on some whale training that he was doing at the time. And he would, the contingency arrangement that he had set up was perfect for what we're talking about right here. So the reinforcer was fish for the whale, feeding the whale fish. And they would ask the fish to do a trick with certain hand signs. So they'd do the sign, the whale would do the trick, come back, you'd throw fish from a bucket. But the genius thing that he did is he also went and tied this floating ball to the side of the pool, where at any time if the whale went and nosed the ball, they also got fish. So now I have 1 degree of freedom. So I have one alternative. So there's, right? And what that did is started revealing information for him. So they started taking data on when is the whale more likely to go and nose the ball versus actually, and that actually gave them a lot of information. What Ken Ramirez found out is that with fresh trainers whose mechanics were kind of sloppy, their hand signals weren't very clear, the whale would go over there. So it actually ended up serving for them as like a test, like, are your skills good enough to where the whale is going to do you see what I mean? Like truly informative and feedback for us, feedback on your own performance. So it's not about the whale. It's about you doing things, arranging the environment in a way where you start seeing more of this behavior. But you will only know that if you had that ball tied to the side of the pool. If that ball wasn't there, you'd think everything is fine. So again, it reveals things that are very useful for us and creates a better environment for our learners. So there's truly pragmatic benefits from it as well.
What gets harder and what gets better when assent is non-negotiable?
It's an interesting question. So I think number one, I think sometimes we're fighting against our history, especially folks who've been in the field for a long time who are kind of used to the like, nope, you put this demand in, like you have to follow through kind of thing. So sometimes it's pride. I do think that's a real variable there.
Yeah.
But it truly can make things easier for you, again, because you start seeing these benefits, you start learning more from your learner, and you don't get into these battles. Like it's not a battle anymore. It's like, no, it's my job. I'm the analyst here to figure out the conditions under which this program works for you and this program doesn't work for you. And it reveals preference. I'll tell you another one. Elizabeth Houghton, she was a great wonderful precision teacher who's no longer with us, but I was talking to her about this idea of degrees of freedom one time, and she was like, this is so interesting, you remind me of something that I did. I didn't even know I was doing this, but I was doing it. I was like, what is it? And she used to teach young children, and she said, I used to spend so much time, this was back in the day she's talking about, drawing and coloring on these math worksheets because I thought kids loved them, like they love these colorful sheets and whatever. So I'd spend time. So she was like, but one day, I thought, maybe they like the plain ones more. Like, I don't know. So she said what she did was she put 2 stacks of the same worksheet with the same math problems on the desk in front of the class. One of them colored with the whatever drawings, and one of them just a plain worksheet. And you know how precision teaching is. There's a lot of timing. There's a lot of drills. So when you finish your sheet, she told the students to go and pick their own sheet. And at the end of the day, she went and saw the stack of colored ones was still this big. The other one, there's barely any sheets in it. So
Wow.
the organism told her, this is my preference, without having to say, because some people don't have the skills to say it, without having to say, I don't like this. It's actually kind of distracting to me. This plain one is a lot better for me. You got that as natural feedback because you set up the environment with a degree of freedom that allowed the organism to actually do whatever suits them best. And it's a start, right? Now I can manipulate different things in the environment. I can change the sheet in a different way, but at least it gave me a starting point that tells me there's something about this way that's better. Now let me move on. Now let's say in the ultimate environment that I want my learner to be, the sheets are going to have all kinds of things in them. Now I can start shaping towards that, right?
Hmm.
But I'm not going to start all the way there. So either way, you're always getting information. But there are situations, since you mentioned it, where, you know, assent kind of goes out the window. And again, folks, especially who work in the adult population, like there are situations in the severe behavior population. Of course, there are situations where in the moment, like you might have to restrict degrees of freedom. You might have to like forego assent in the most ethical way possible, of course, like still, but take that as a data point and then like in the future think about other ways to do it. Like you can revisit something. There might be a moment where someone's about to run across the street and your only option is to physically hold them. Well, of course, you know, because some people who aren't big fans of assent, when I'm giving like workshops and talks about it, bring up these examples. So what would you do here? You know, you just let them run across. Oh no, of course not. We won't let
Yeah.
them run across the street. But then later on, I would go back and revisit this and say, what skills did they need to have so they could wait on the thing to turn from the stop hand to the walking person? You know, let's do some discrimination training. Let's think about what was the big MO for them to run across the street. Can we rearrange the environment? Like, take that as what it is in the moment, but then revisit it. You know, don't make your protocols and your procedures based on already taking assent out. But of course, there are situations like we live in the real world and we see those situations, but take it as a data point and see how you can plan for it differently in the future.
The second secret word is assent. Yeah. And I mean, I think that just speaks to good behavior analysis. I mean, sometimes we forget we're analysts. We're here to analyze every contingency, every context, every situation all the time. And in that moment, it's an opportunity to sort of, if you can't offer, you know, an assent, a way out, as it were, take a look at why and see if you can do it next time. So yeah, I think that's really important. We get a little meta here. What contingencies do you currently see shaping how behavior analysts work, and how does the constructional approach respond to those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's interesting. We're at a time where ABAs is under a lot of scrutiny, but I do feel like a lot of the scrutiny will actually end up being good for behavior analysis. There's scrutiny, no doubt. I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. But it's putting us in a better place. Like it's making people have to repay. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I just want to make sure I'm not saying like these are new concepts, but coming back to again paying more attention to compassion, again paying more attention to assent, again paying attention to not doing things like escape extinction and you know, lots of hand over hand prompting, the type that becomes aversive. And forcing us to go in and be creative. You know, my advisor at Endicott, Dr. Joe Layng, he worked with Goldiamond himself. And he said that what the constructional approach did for them is it forced them to be creative. He said that in lab, Goldiamond would tell them things like, well, we know that if you punish this behavior, it would go down. But what are we learning from that? We're not learning anything. We know that. Go in there and be a true contingency analyst, be a true behavioral engineer, and figure out, how can I go in there with compassion while centering assent, establishing repertoires in a way that doesn't make people want to run away from me? Like, how can I do that? Take that on as a challenge. No matter how challenging the behavior is, like, take that on as a challenge as much as you can. And like, look at it as, I used this metaphor one time when I was talking to someone about being constructional. Look at it as the pursuit of happiness, right? What is it? Freedom, no, it's not. See, now I'm gonna mess it up, but it was something like, and the pursuit of happiness, but now I forgot the first two. Here it comes: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it's really interesting that they said pursuit of happiness. And when I was talking to this person, I said, we should pursue being constructional. Like, as long as we're on that road towards being more constructional, then we're doing good. Like, then the movement is going in the right direction. Don't hold, you know, let's give ourselves compassion too. Like, we're all trying our best as well. But I think these contingencies are coming to the field and forcing us to engage in these behaviors and be more creative. But it's for the better. I mean, I don't remember in my, you know, which I'm very young in the field compared to some other people, but I don't remember assent being talked about this much, or compassion being talked about this much, or paying attention to people's histories being talked about this much, or actually asking people what they want being talked about this much. But it's a weird thing for me because my introduction to behavior analysis was through the constructional approach. So I came in like thinking this is like, oh, like everyone like asks people where they want to go. Like everyone goes in to build behavior. And then I started taking these classes, like your classic ABA classes. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like what I was learning is not the norm. This is not the norm. But the more I'm in the field, the more that's becoming the norm. That's the thing that more people are talking about. But I think while doing that and while moving in that direction, we should hold ourselves to the standard of like, let's remain true to our philosophy, like, because our philosophy can take us there as well. Like while being radical behaviorist, I can also honor assent. While being radical behaviorist, I can also acknowledge people's histories of trauma or otherwise. While be like let's not set that aside also, because I feel like some people kind of move to that other extreme where now we're talking about mentalistic things.
Yes.
No, take that, because you're not bringing anything special to the table if you jump into that world and you start talking like them. We bring something to the table if we go into that world and we say, oh, you're talking about being trauma informed? That's awesome. And that sounds really important. I'm going to sit back and think about the contingencies around that. I'm going to think about a contingency analysis of that so that it can actually be pragmatic for me so I can use it, just like I was talking about with Assent. Instead of going in there and just talking about it like, oh, this is important and we should do this, like truly, let's get down to procedures and let's look at the contingencies behind everything, because that's what makes us special. Like we're in this field, so let's use the lens that this field gives us to tackle these problems that other fields might not be able to go as far. Let's actually use our tools when it comes to these new things that people are bringing up as well.
Yeah, right on. I want to shift a bit to your own path here. What drew you personally to the constructional approach? All
right. Well, that's kind of a long story, but we have time, so we'll go ahead and start. I'm going to start a little far back because I don't talk often about like my full background, and I feel like I feel like I kind of have a responsibility too. So I'm going to start very far back, but then quickly fast forward to where I am. So my parents are from Palestine. That's where the whole story started. They immigrated to Jordan when things happened in Palestine back in the day. And then from there, immigrated to the US. And so I come from a family who are Palestinian, but I was born here in Dallas, Texas. So I went to college, didn't know anything about college, truly. Like I'll be frank here about this. I was a first generation college student. So I walked in I went in as a psychology major just because I really enjoyed, learning about people, talking to people. First class I walked into at the University of North Texas, this was 2009, was a class with 450 students in this huge auditorium. So I walk in there and I'm like, where am I? Like, how am I supposed to learn in this environment? Like, talk about not having the repertoires required. I did not have the repertoires required whatsoever. But serendipity, is a real thing and it takes place sometimes. So after lots of struggles in the beginning, I ended up taking this class called Science, Skepticism, and Weird Behavior. That was the actual catalog name of the class at UNC. Yeah. And it was taught by Dr. Jonathan Pinkston, who now I believe is at University of Kansas. But back then he was still at UNT. The class had nothing to do with behavior analysis. But I enjoyed the professor so much that the next semester when I was registering for classes, I look up his name and it turns out he teaches this class that's called Introduction to Behavior Analysis. So I was like, you know what? I don't know anything about this, but this professor is really cool, so I'm going to take this class. So I walk into that class again as a psychology major who's only like heard of Skinner did things with rats and pigeons in a general, like that's all I knew. But I walk in and literally that first intro lecture that John Pinkston gave, he talked about the science of behavior being a natural science. Blew my mind. Like, I remember I walked out of that class, I was crying, like literally crying, tears.
Wow, amazing.
I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Like, I was like, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. There's no question about it. I found exactly what I'm passionate about. So from there, again, serendipitously, I was at UNT, which was, it still is one of the best behavior analysis programs that you can find around the world. Who knew it was right there under my nose the whole time? Started joining labs. Dr. Tracy Sheehan was amazing. And back, I did not know what a lab was. Like, again, I'm coming in with like no academic repertoire whatsoever. So Tracy Sheehan really taught me the ropes about how to do research, how to think behaviorally, took more classes, ended up with a minor in behavior analysis, started grad school, and then I met Jesus Rosales-Ruiz. And his lab was called Constructional Life Design.
Wow.
Amazing lab. I learned so much there. That's what introduced me, mainly to the constructional approach. We started applying the constructional approach with undergraduate students who were first generation college students and were from different socioeconomic backgrounds, which I could relate to these folks, right? And doing the constructional approach with them, asking them truly, what do they want out of their college experience? What do they want out of their degree? That's what got me into it. But when I first learned about behavior analysis, I started reading Skinner, and there was, Skinner still, you can't tell, but half the books behind me are Skinner's books. Truly gave me a solid grounding in behavior analysis and how behavior analysis is this thing that can be applied to anything. It's not just ABA, like behavior analysis can be applied to anything. Skinner was really good at painting that picture for you. So the next step I felt like naturally was Goldiamond. So when I started reading Goldiamond and seeing the questions that he asked and the problems that he was solving, so it was more typical like adult counseling type of cases. And I was like, this is awesome. Like this is what we should be doing more of, but come to learn that, not many people are still doing that now. But through that program, I met Dr. Joe Layng. And then again, so like, of course, he worked with Goldiamond directly. And then I felt like it gave me an edge, an advantage also professionally when I'm entering situations. So a lot of times I would, people would be talking about a topic or a client, and I could always present an angle that was fresh, that other people didn't see until then. And the question is like, also, how can we get other people to see it this way? But it gave me this way of thinking that a lot of people didn't have, but then also gave me a way to solve problems where I could actually see the problem. I could see the solution develop and take on for a long time. It's a hard case to talk about, but one of the cases that I presented at the conference that you were referring to earlier was this client who was throwing things off her desk, but we ended up shaping that into this whole repertoire of playing catch with a ball, playing catch with her friends, throwing the ball into a hoop, like as if she's playing basketball. And you start seeing these repertoires evolve and take off on their own and create whole new communities of reinforcement. That's powerful. That's very powerful. And that truly gets you to want to learn more and to do more. And here we are today.
You kind of touched on these folks already, these influences and mentors. How important is mentorship in this movement?
I mean, I feel like, to me, it's everything. Like you have to have, we're humans, like we're social. It's all about our social environment. And when we're growing up in our behavior analysis life, being taught, find the function, put in a DRO, find the function, use extinction to get rid of the problem behavior, instead of like find the function and then ask yourself why that's the function, and then teach other repertoires that will truly take over to where that function doesn't even matter anymore. Like that's a completely different way of thinking, but how else are you going to get introduced to it? Like, again, like I said, I was lucky enough to find myself in this situation where Jesus was right down the hall and I could go ask him about it. But now we find ourselves, like, I think this is a great time for the constructional approach. Like the fact that you're doing this series, if you would have told me this 10 years ago when I was getting into the constructional approach, I wouldn't have believed you, because it was a few people around the world you can count on a hand or two. But now we have this constructional group online, like on Facebook, that people can join. They can ask questions. They can get resources. We have the constructional conference that's going through Endicott College 2 years in a row, breaking record numbers when it comes to Endicott. Like, I think we're truly in a time where if people want the mentorship, they can get it in more than one way. They can they can, come into these events. Also, we're trying to put out some of this work, whether it's in books, whether it's in papers. But again, before, if you go 10 years ago, some of the most recent stuff on the constructional approach would have been the 80s. I mean, there was truly kind of a lull in that research, and there's a whole lot of reasons, but we're not getting into that today. But
Hmm.
now there's definitely a revival of it, and the resources are abundant. People can listen to several podcasts out there on the constructional approach. They can find the book on the constructional approach. There's a couple of other books coming out. They can find the papers out there. There's a lot for people to learn from if this is
Hmm.
something that they're interested in. And as we were talking about earlier, I think it's only going to match the current contingencies that behavior analysis is facing more and more, to where that popularity is getting inevitable. And speaking of that mentorship, this gives me the opportunity to say something that I've been saying more and more in the talks that I'm giving. Because it's getting popular, I also start getting worried that people are going to adopt the word without adopting the whole philosophy and without developing the
Hmm.
competencies necessary to.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing people use the word constructional, and I'm looking at the actual program, and it's not constructional. I'm seeing people talk about
Hmm.
constructional approach who, you know, through one way or another, I know they don't have these competencies, and it starts worrying me
Hmm.
that now we're going to say constructional just to match the current contingency
Hmm.
without actually behaving constructionally. But I think
Yeah.
every movement that starts developing faces that. But again, I'm just here to urge people, if you're interested in this, there are so many people who are more than happy to talk to you about it. There's so many
Yeah.
resources we can point you to, and we're not trying to make money off of you either. Like the constructional Facebook group, everything we've been offering there, the Endicott conferences, all of them are free. Like, this isn't
Hmm.
one of these schemes where we're trying to come up with this program that we can sell. It's not that at all. This is just something that we truly find beneficial for us and for our clients. And the more people who learn about it, in our opinion, the better.
Hmm. That's amazing. One name that you've kind of been dropping throughout this, that I think not everyone is familiar with. They're starting to hear it more, but he's not with us anymore. Is Israel Goldiamond? For listeners who are unfamiliar with him, who was Israel Goldiamond, and kind of why does his work matter here?
Yeah, Israel Goldiamond, he was a true scholar. Like, if you look at some of his work and where he was publishing in psychoanalysis journals and psychology, in journals, in the Mexican Journal of Behavior Analysis,
Hmm.
in the Europe, I mean, all over the world. Joe would tell me, Joe, when I say Joe, I'm talking about Joe Layng.
Hmm.
Joe would tell me that sometimes more people outside of behavior analysis knew Goldiamond than inside of behavior analysis. Also,
Hmm.
because he didn't really work in the world of autism and developmental disabilities, you don't contact his work as much. I've met
Hmm.
several people who have PhDs in behavior analysis who haven't heard of Goldiamond, which is very, it's surprising to me. But at the same time,
Hmm.
if you're not looking kind of outside the box,
Yeah.
you won't find it. But he was working also very much interdisciplinarily. So he was working with psychoanalysts to do this, what he called a control analysis, and go back and forth. We describe it in the Nonlinear Contingency Analysis book. In that first chapter, we describe kind of the development of the constructional approach, and it really came from these three very different people, so Goldiamond and two others, who come from different backgrounds. They were working with clients while watching each other. So one of them would
Hmm.
be working with the client while the other two are watching, and they would see what worked the best, what didn't work, what strategy. So it was inductively shaped, but
Hmm.
it didn't come out of nowhere. It was based on the philosophy of behavior analysis. So it's not something that's added or new to ABA, but it comes from within ABA. It just took it and said, let's put a little more focus on some other areas that truly will give us the most gain as possible. Goldiamond was at the University of Chicago. Two of his students that mostly carried the constructional approach after him were Joe Layng, who I already mentioned, and then Paul Andronis
Hmm.
at Northern Michigan University, and now is teaching a couple of classes at Endicott College. So a lot of his other students, I've asked Joe about this before, went into private practice and so on, but
Hmm.
Joe and Paul really carried that work. And then Jesus Rosales at the University of North Texas, he happened to also run into Goldiamond back in the 90s and learned a lot from him, and continued that line of constructional work within UNT. And I think Jesus deserves so much credit for keeping
Hmm.
the constructional approach alive,
Hmm.
because he has a class at UNT that's, you read 90% of what you read in that class is Goldiamond.
Hmm.
We get 3 spiral bound books that are all made up of articles, and 90% of them is Goldiamond. So you
Hmm.
truly get that deep dive into it. And I feel like that helped keep the approach alive. And with this new movement of people just applying it in all different places rather than it being focused on, mental health, adult counseling type work, it's getting carried more into the developmental disabilities world.
Hmm.
And I think we're seeing a lot of gains, and we're going to keep moving in that directions most
Hmm.
likely.
Hmm. I'm curious what ideas of his are most misunderstood or unappreciated.
Yeah, misunderstood. Probably, probably nonlinear contingency analysis.
Hmm.
I think people think it's a lot more different, complex, or it can get complex, but I don't think it has to be complex. I think people can do a pretty simple nonlinear contingency analysis simply by just looking at the contingencies of the alternatives, and then the other thing that I think lends itself to misunderstanding is that the way he wrote, again, like I said, he was like truly one of these old time scholars
Hmm.
who wrote in this language that is not easy to read, and his papers
Hmm.
are long. So his original paper, the 1974 paper, was 82, 83 pages
Hmm.
long. It's not an easy read. Like, you have to sit with it like it's a book and take
Hmm.
take a couple of months to digest it little by little. The idea where where the nonlinear contingency analysis was first hinted at but not named, like I said, until 84, 85. That it was a 75 paper called Alternative Sets. So he was talking about different sets of contingencies. But truly, that paper, if you want to sit down with it and understand it, might take you more than months. It might take you a full year, and
Hmm.
you might be just halfway through that paper. So it
Hmm.
was written in a way that was hard to understand. For today's audience, I think at its time, it was, we were living in a different world. So part of truly what we're trying to do here with this movement is rephrase it and use more
Hmm.
recent examples and use
Hmm.
more recent language so that people can see past the topographical aspects of it
Hmm.
and see functionally how this can help them in their everyday work.
Hmm. I really appreciate you saying that it might take a year to get through that paper. It's motivated me to try again, because I have tried in the past and kind of given up, and knowing that months or a year is an acceptable time
Yes,
frame to get through this
definitely.
paper, it definitely makes me want to give it another go. If Goldiamond were around today, what do you think he'd be most excited or concerned about?
Okay, let's see. This is hypothetical here. I think again, according to Joe and Paul's feedback, because they knew him personally, they said that he would really be excited to see all of this being brought back to life
Yeah.
and rejuvenated, and the constructional approach truly being like centered, which
Hmm.
ultimately, like, it helps our analysis, it helps our clients. Like, this isn't about, and I want to make this clear, and this is why, like, I go back and forth on even like including pictures of Goldiamond in my slides sometimes.
Hmm.
I don't want people to think this is like a type of a hero worship, or like, wow, like, look, he was just as susceptible to contingencies as any of us are. We're all just behaving in accordance to our contingencies, but
Hmm.
the work truly ends up benefiting the people that we're working with. And at the end of the day, our science that we're talking about right now is an applied science. So,
Hmm.
like, that's what matters. So I think it would make him happy and excited to see this work that's actually being done to help people on the daily.
Hmm. Yeah. I also kind of wonder if having a last name of Gold and Diamond doesn't really help with that whole sort of idol worship thing. Um,
It is a legendary name.
Absolutely. For someone who's curious and wants to learn more, how can they start engaging with the constructional approach?
Yeah. Some of the resources that I mentioned earlier, I think the most approachable way is to listen to some of these podcasts. There's truly a lot of good podcasts on it.
There is.
By Joe, like, look up the some of the interviews by Joe Layng, some of the
Hmm.
interviews by Jesus Ruiz. Like, there's a lot out there, and we're trying to create more. And I think
Hmm.
that gives you kind of the general impression of what it means to be constructional. And then when you're ready to truly dive deeper, then look into getting the book. And I have to say,
Hmm.
there's a conflict of interest here. I make, I think, 5 or 10 cents out of each copy, but it is still a conflict of interest. But again, we tried to make it written in a way that people more likely would be able to understand it now. Also, look up, the freely available papers that we have. And I think a good way to do that is to join the Constructional Facebook group.
Hmm.
We when we started that group, it literally started with just me and Anna Linehan. She's like my partner in crime when it comes to
Hmm.
the constructional approach and disseminating it. But we started it just as a place for, like, if you're interested, join here and ask your questions. Like, let's all share resources. And now we have over like 1,200 people in it, which, again, tell me this 10 years ago, I won't believe it.
Hmm.
But here we are living it. Join a group like that and ask your questions there. Like, throw it
Hmm.
out there.
Hmm.
It's okay to be vulnerable and ask your questions. And I feel like the community is very generous with going back and forth. But first level, just the topical level of listening to some podcasts, just to wet your whistle a little bit and get
Hmm.
what it's kind of generally about. But
Hmm.
then to truly appreciate it, you have to dive into the literature and then start doing it and start asking for feedback from folks who have more expertise in it. And
Hmm.
I think as soon as you start contacting those reinforcers for doing it, it'll
Hmm.
take off and live on its own. And truly, at the end of the day, that's what matters.
That's amazing. You mentioned the book, which you get a nickel or a dime from. I know there's some new resources coming out. Can you talk a bit about a second edition of the book, I believe, and something else? Can you tell me about the new books coming out?
Yeah, so we're making a second edition of the book. It should be out this summer.
Hmm.
Mostly truly responding to the feedback that we got from the first. So
Hmm.
some people were asking about more recent applications of it, more, using some examples within the text that more folks can relate to who are currently working with clients. So we did that. We also added, for example, a chapter on Assent. We added a section on constructional exposure therapy, which I'm not going to go into deeply because you said you were going to interview some other folks like
Hmm.
Katie and Danielle who have been doing this great work, and they'll definitely dive fully into it. But we added some of that stuff in the book that came out more recently so that people can have access to it. And then the other resource that also should come out around the same times is a book that's it's an edited book that's just chapters from a bunch of different people. We have 16
Hmm.
chapters in it, and it's
Hmm.
all just applications of the constructional approach. So these are all just case
Hmm.
studies. These are
Wow.
people applying the actual. So, like, you're going to get to see this data, and again, so the rationale behind that one is, like I said earlier, we're working on putting out peer-reviewed publication. But anyone who's done that work knows that clinical practice way outpaces journal publications. That's
Hmm.
just the process. It is what it is. So we wanted to put this out quickly because people keep asking for examples, and this is going
Hmm.
to give you a lot of examples. We also there's several gems in it. So, for example, the first chapter in the book actually is a recording from 1978. There was a conference where Goldiamond first introduced his take, a radical behaviorist take on emotions, and it was
Hmm.
tape recorded. So we transcribed it, of course, got all the appropriate permissions, which was the whole thing, but we got all the permissions. And that's the first chapter that we open with, is just a radical behavioral approach to emotions from Goldiamond himself transcribed there. And then, the rest of the book has actual case studies. So those will definitely be two other resources that are coming out this summer that hopefully will further this movement and give people more that they can hold on to. Because I think our group has been pretty active in going to conferences and presenting case studies and so on.
Yeah.
But this will give a written resource for folks to keep and reference more easily.
Hmm. As this monthly series unfolds, I'm wondering what aspects of the constructional approach are you most excited for people to explore more deeply?
I think people are going to be really excited about constructional exposure therapy. I feel like it's bright, very bright future for that. We have a really good group of people. We meet every week just to talk about constructional exposure therapy, folks who have actual cases going on. We submitted a paper to Behavior Analysis and Practice, so hopefully that'll be out sometime soon. But it's going to give people an alternative in those situations where you feel like you need to use escape extinction, where negative reinforcement is the reinforcer. It's going to give people a different view on how to approach it and harness that negative reinforcer,
Hmm.
harness that already occurring. Remember, we're not imposing it. We're walking into an environment where it's already imposed, and now I'm going to harness it to shape more effective repertoires, to get that escape, and then ultimately to get whatever it is that's necessary. So a lot of the examples that you'll hear about in the series will be around people getting blood draws, for example. People get, nail clipping. Danielle will hopefully talk about that. These are problems that have had long histories, and you go in, you use that negative reinforcer that's already there to shape. And a lot of that credit, or most of it, I should say, belongs to Jesus Rosales Ruiz, again, because he started applying some of this work in the experimental world within animal training, like with aggression and fear in animals. And we took those procedures and said, how can we translate this and actually work within the settings that we're working in? And that's where we came up with constructional exposure therapy. So I think that'll be a big one. Talking about emotions, I think, will be huge. Hopefully when you talk to Jillian, and maybe you'll end up also talking to Dr. Anna Linehan, they're doing amazing things working with emotions, again, from a radical contingency analysis perspective, where we're looking at emotions as contingency descriptors. We're looking at these emotions as describing something about the changing contingencies in the environment. Not going in and saying this is a respondent, not going in and saying let's reduce the emotional behavior, not going in and telling people to just accept it and move along, but telling people understand it and then do something about it. It's telling you something about your changing contingencies. I think that work. And then, when you talk to folks like Angela, we touched on Assent briefly, but Angela is doing a lot of amazing work with teaching people this concept analysis of Assent and giving people these decision trees that they can actually use in practice to quickly find out, do I have Assent here? What do I need to change in in my environment? I think those are the areas that come to mind that I think folks would be the most excited about, and hopefully, maybe this will also be interesting to your audience. But there's people doing amazing stuff in constructional animal training as well. So Sean Will and Masa Nishimuta also are doing amazing things with the constructional approach with animals, and I think that. Behavior analysts have a lot to learn from animal trainers. We have to remember at the end of the day, it's about constructing that environment and truly analyzing the contingencies. And I think working with animals can give us a lot of repertoires in that analysis and in shaping that can truly be beneficial. And I think it's a little underappreciated in the behavior analysis world right now, but that's a huge area that we can learn a lot from also.
Well, Sean and Masa are already signed up, so I'm talking to them in the spring, so it's going to be awesome. If listeners take away just one idea from this conversation, what do you hope it is?
I would go back to where we started. I would hope that truly every situation they approach, if there's something urgent, of course, address it. I want to make sure people don't say, bring that up. Truly, if there's something urgent, address it, of course. But when I'm faced with a problem, please just sit back and ask yourself, what's the repertoire that happens to which is the problem? And if you think, wow, he's just oversimplifying it. Is it really just about this one question? Of course, it's not just about this question, but I think this question puts us at an angle that changes our trajectory of what we do after it. When we go in asking what's the behavior that we need to establish that would make that problem go away, it sets us up to be more likely to be successful in whatever we do after it. When Goldiamond introduced the constructional approach, he said it's an orientation. He called it an orientation, and I love that word because truly it does give you a lens that you're just looking at things differently. I walk into a situation and I see it differently than someone else who's coming in and focusing on reducing the problem behavior. And I think we can gain a lot from that.
That's amazing. Awab Abdel-Jalil, thanks so much for coming on, introducing the constructional approach to the audience, and looking forward to connecting with you again soon.
Of course. Thanks for the opportunity. Happy to be here.
Awesome. The third secret word is humane. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and subscribe to our YouTube page @BehaviorSpeak. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.